The Tower of London was a central tool used to employ a monarch's power as well as impose order throughout the reign of multiple monarchs by eliminating their rivals. Two of those monarchs were Henry VIII and James I. They were kings during the time that Anne Askew and Guy Fawkes were imprisoned. Anne Askew was a martyr of religion and the only known woman to be tortured in the Tower. Guy Fawkes was tortured and executed for his plot to blow up King James I in the infamous Gunpowder Plot. Construction of the Tower of London began in 1078 by William the Conqueror. It was built with the purpose of protecting and controlling the city. The tower was a place where the monarchs of England could garrison armies, seek refuge, and establish a base of operations. Over time, the Tower of London transformed into a site of incarceration for anyone, including members of the royal family, who posed a threat to national security. Not all prisoners suffered terrible conditions. Wealthy inmates were allowed to live relatively luxurious lives in the tower. Other prisoners were sometimes subjected to torture. Torture was used as a means of compelling political prisoners to provide information. Two of the most well-known prisoners in the tower were Anne Askew and Guy Fawkes. Anne Askew was born in 1521 in Lincolnshire, England. Her father, William Askew, was a wealthy landowner and part of the court of King Henry VIII. Anne was a devout Protestant. It was this devotion to her religious beliefs that ended her marriage to her Catholic husband and ultimately led to her imprisonment in the Tower. Askew left Lincolnshire for London, where she would build relationships with other like-minded Protestants and become a preacher. Between 1545 and 1546, she would be arrested on multiple occasions for her religious activity. In May of 1546, Anne Askew was arrested and imprisoned in the Tower of London. There she was put on the rack and tortured by Thomas Wriothesley and Richard Rich in an effort to extract the names of other Protestants. Despite the torture she endured, Anne refused to name others. On June 18, 1546, she was found guilty of heresy and was condemned to burn at the stake. Guy Fawkes became a Catholic when he was a child because of his stepdad, during a time when Catholics were persecuted by Elizabeth I. He left England to join the 80 Years' War on the side of the Catholic Spain. While at war in the Netherlands, he was invited to join a conspiracy to assassinate King James I that would become known as the Gunpowder Plot. The conspirators rented space below a House of Lords, where James, who was a Protestant, was expected to be. Fawkes is credited with planting an estimated 36 barrels of gunpowder underneath the building. When the plot was discovered, Fawkes was arrested and sent to the Tower of London to be held and interrogated before his execution. Like Anne Askew, he was placed on the rack and tortured until he gave the names of his co-conspirators. James I was said to have admired Fawkes' devotion, but he also ordered a second round of torture by way of manacles at first leading up to the rack, if he continued not giving the names of his accomplices. Sir William Waad, who was the lieutenant of the Tower, oversaw the torture over a 3-day period. He was held in the Tower from November 5th until his execution on the 31st of January. Both Anne Askew and Guy Fawkes were imprisoned as a result of the political circumstances surrounding their religious beliefs. Anne was tortured and executed as a Protestant martyr. However, it is important to note that the circumstances of her imprisonment were tied up in a political conflict between Catholic and Protestant reformers in Henry VIII's court, as well as pending alliance with Holy Roman Emperor Charles V that required a stop to religious reform in England. The actions of Guy Fawkes, while religiously motivated, were also considered an act of treason against the sovereign and therefore against the state.